Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone around the world. I am Paul Sisler, and this is In the Moment. Today's segment of the Vellum. T-Paw is here. Hello, T-Paw.
Hello. Hey.
All right. So today we're going to talk about humanizing your side characters. Let's give that sidekick some life. Start us off.
Exactly. Yeah. So I was thinking about it recently because I just got done publishing Sake of the Dame second edition, and I'm working on Storms of Blood. Now, while I'm doing that in the machinations of my insanity, I will be focusing on the main characters, but the thing that a lot of our stories need the goddamn side characters. You can't be a musician on stage without your backstage crew. You can't, be operating just as yourself. You have to have your crew and you have to have your background people. And so Peter wouldn't be Peter without the guy at the gas station who's, it literally has like a minute of screen time, and yet that's what the audience remembers. And so, you know, I wanted to talk a bit about humanizing side characters, balancing it within the narrative and making your story work with side people. Like, for instance, Guardians of the Galaxy, one of my favorite examples. When I was watching Infinity War and Endgame, you know who stood out to me the most? Not Iron Man, not Thor. Like, the Guardians did. And technically, in the grand scheme of things of Marvel, the Guardians of the Galaxy are the side characters. They're, the offshoot. They're the James Gunn dug deep into the barrel of not even D list or C list, but Z list characters that nobody would think to remember, and he somehow humanized a talking tree and a talking raccoon. In fact, he spent the second act of the second movie comparing Yondu to Rocket Raccoon. And they have that whole verbal debate in like near the third act where Yondu's like, you know why you have such problems with a raccoon? And he called him a rabbit, and he's like, why? He's like, because you're just like me. And like, he was basically, there was that heart there. And so when you're humanizing a side character, you're not just being like, okay, their name is Bob and they have no backstory. Like, they're just there to talk to the hero and give him a quest. Like, when you're humanizing them, you're giving them like something for the audience to latch onto. And oftentimes Bob ends up becoming the one that's the most memorable. You walk out of the theater and go, well, at least Bob was funny. Or you walk out of the theater and go, well, that moment where that one guy went and did that one thing with the main hero. He's getting thrown around his hammer and stuff. They're doing action sequences. But you know what? That one character that I don't remember the name of, he was fucking funny. And then you're just like, wait a minute, wait, which character? And you look it up, and you're curious, and you look it up, and you're like, that guy was named Bob, and he was just that random guy in the background that like almost nobody would ever think about, and yet he's the side character. He would have his own fucking movie. So a lot of times when studios run out of fumes and they run out of ideas to talk about with their main heroes, they're like, let's give a Disney Plus series to the side character that nobody ever thought about. And so, that's one of the things I wanted to talk about was, creating the backstories for them, making them real, making them memorable. Because in your own life, you're a side character to somebody else's experience. And oftentimes, especially if you feel down or depressed or you're having a mental health stuff going on, you really start to feel like you're fading into the background as a side character versus as a main character. When in reality, you are your own main protagonist. Paul just got done showing me this giant Goliath like list of characters in which likely two or three of them will be mains and like the rest of them will be sides. And yet he's got to like really give a heart to that entire rest of the cast list that he's going to, because he's got a focus, he's got a trilogy and stuff that he's working on a series. And he's still got to give that heart to the other characters that like the audience will be like, oh, I know the main character is named X and the other named character is named X or Y, but I really love that other character that you like gave like 20 minutes of screen time to. And so that's one of the things I want to talk about was making it to where your side characters are real and making it to where they're, humanized, making it to where they are animated, the 3D, they jump off the page. Because oftentimes that will also be the difference between a linear narrative that's more 2D and it's more like, pun slinging, action slinging type thing to being evocative and, multi-layered. What are some of your thoughts on that, Paul?
No, I mean, when you start getting into all these multiple characters and stuff, um, as I just showed you my list before we started. All right.
Yep.
I have my protagonist. I have my vampire antagonist. I have my druid antagonist. Okay.
Hmm.
I have my dynamics. Okay. My vampires, I got 2 dynamics, and my druids, I'm going to have 3 dynamics. Then I have all of my statics. Okay. Those statics are those sidekicks. All right. And those static characters all have, I'm doing my book in first person present, and every now and again, one of the speaking parts comes up and it's one of those statics. And with that, you kind of see more of their personality, where they're coming from, how they actually view the person they are supposed to be protecting or representing or standing behind. And it's like, wow, this person really doesn't like their boss. You know, so you start to realize that there's more about even your main characters. They help reinforce your main characters. So you have to give them a life. They can't be just like in the scene and out of the scene. And oh, suddenly here we go. We got Knight Malcolm coming back here and all that. And he's somebody's servant, and then bam, he's gone. It's just a name that you call on. Excuse me. I've given my Knight Malcolm and all that a little backstory and a little personality and why it takes him so long. And now you realize that when the Sovereign's looking for Knight Malcolm, why isn't Knight Malcolm here? Because Knight Malcolm doesn't want to put up with the Sovereign shit. So
Yes.
yes, so you give a little life to those characters, and even though they're not prevalent, you're gonna be like, yeah, I understand where that Malcolm's coming from and all that. I really don't like this fucking Sovereign. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. So that's why sorry, still getting over a freaking off. But like basically when I was thinking about this, some of my characters in my own story, like I have the ghost children, which are the minions of the bad guy, and then I have like other characters that are in the background. But anytime I'm creating them, I'm always like, well, what's their life like? Like I know we're focused so much on Peter right now, or we're focused on whatever main protagonist I'm focused on. But what is their life like? Does Jace or Bob have a life of their own? Like does what did Sarah have before she died? Because if she's a ghost child, that means she died as a child. And so what is her life like? And so while I was editing, I was reading out a couple chapters to my buddy for Storms of Blood, the sequel that I'm working on. And I read out a chapter where a character dies. And he said that while I was doing good at developing her as a character before she, perished, he said that I needed to add more to her. Like he said that it would level up in tone and level up in mirroring with the other main character if I gave her more of a story. And so I immediately was like, my brain was worrying, and suddenly like I was like, wait a minute, what if she after she dies she becomes a wraith? Like what if that character ends up like gaining a whole new story outside of that? Because a lot of times in stories, character dies and then that's credits. But like, what if for this character, a particular character, she's so angry at her life, she's so angry at the fact that she got offed. She's confused. Her emotions are worrying as a person, and she's like, "Well, I was a person, but now I'm not a person." And what if that's a spin-off story? Like, what if that side character ends up becoming a main protagonist, which is what I was making the joke about. Let's give that character a Disney Plus series. But like, I was thinking about like side characters who go on and transcend the roster list and they become their own main character, which honestly is one of my favorite parts of storytelling. Is when you could take a main character and tell their story, yeah, but you could take that side character that's not even in focus, and then you could like change the dial on the camera to where you're now focusing on the background character, and then you're like, what's your life like? Like, were you like, what was your job? Were you a student? Were you like a janitor, security guard? What was your life like? And then suddenly you end up like finding out sometimes a far more interesting story than you were telling before. Like Orion, my werewolf. He started out as a sidekick, as just a sidekick. But then after I went ahead and developed more into this story, I found the other side of the coin of fatherhood. Like, a father who's not always around, a father who does what they need to do to like make sure the kid's taken care of course, but they're not physically involved with their life. But yet they somehow know about their life. And it's only because that particular character has the resources to do so. But it's exploring that part of our human experience where not everybody has their father around. And so when I went into that pain, I went into that story, suddenly Orion's character, like one of my previous releases, a fan actually reached out to me and said that Orion really spoke to them because of the fact that Orion speaks to a lot of people who their parents walked out or their parents weren't around, and so your side character can then speak to their pain. So that's another reason why I wanted to talk about side characters and how important they are to a narrative, because not only can they become your favorite part of the narrative, but they can also transcend their own role in that current story and become one of the most beloved characters of your universe. Like, no one ever expected Groot, who says one line, "I am Groot," and he says it like 80,000 different ways, to become like a biggest piece of merchandise and a biggest piece of like media for everybody. Like, every time you share a meme anywhere, or if I'm at like my job and stuff and I'm like posting an emoji, usually like everyone's like, "Oh yeah, he shared the Groot emoji, that's amazing." But nobody ever expected that to happen. Is because James Gunn, the brilliant storyteller that he is, elevated his own narrative and made it to where even though Groot says one line, multiple times, different ways, he became one of the most beloved characters. And so when, he had his first death in the first Guardians movie, you're like, "Whoa!" And then you're like, when he said, "We are Groot," you're just like, "Yes, we're Groot. We're Groot." And like, when you watch the next one, you see him as a teenager and he's like evolved as a different type of version of him. And you just have like this beloved love towards the people that are in the background. And like, especially when you live a life where you feel like you yourself are in the background, that's kind of important, because then you have your form of representation. Since I know that that's a word that's used a lot in media, is representation. So you could have the character that nobody would ever look at or spare a glance at, and then bring them into the foreground.
Yes, yes. See, I have characters, and the other thing about having side characters is that you can always come back and utilize them. You can utilize them for different things. I have one character that you're happy to see die, and yet I reuse that character in future conversations because of the brutality of his death and how it was done and what that represents. So that brings up future conversation. I have a waitress that, apparently it's just like, yeah, okay. So she was a waitress that was a little pissy and a little scared, and yet she was sympathetic to a situation. Okay. And later on, you find out more about that waitress because she actually plays an intricate part to the story. Even though she's not even a static character, it's just a reference point. So exactly. So again, the sidekicks, the secondary characters, or the wherever you want to place them in your lineup and all that, they are very, very important, for a multitude of reasons.
Exactly. Yeah. And another thing that you talked about, death of sidekicks, which is one of my notes, is that if you kill off a sidekick and they're beloved, and they will often resonate more with you than if your hero dies, or if like the love interest dies. Because if the love interest dies, it's almost expected, because either they're being fridged, or because they're trying to like send some message about the value of life or whatever. But if that friggin' side character dies, especially if that character's a dog, oh my god, PETA's not the only thing coming after you. And so like, you're gonna end up risking something because of the fact that you killed off that damn dog or that damn cat. And so honestly, what's funny is, in Mandalorian, technically the armorer and Bo-Katan are side characters before third season. Second season or first season, Bo was a side character. She was a cameo, and then she got brought to the forefront. But like you have Paz Vizsla, who, spoiler alert, he died of Fear's death, but he was an awesome side character, and he helped elevate Din's rite of passage in coming back to the Mandalorian clan, and it was a giant role. Like I loved, like my wife loved Paz Vizsla more than she did Mandalorian himself. Like we're watching Mando for third season, and she's like, "They better not kill him off," and I'm like, "Paz?" And she's like, "Yes, Paz." What do you think I'm talking about? She's like, "I love Paz Vizsla," and I'm like, "He's had like maybe 10 minutes of screen time total," and she's like, "That's the point. He's amazing." So, you can make your side characters become like one of the best parts of your narrative, like really quickly, as long as you do them right and as long as you humanize them. Especially after they wrote that one episode where they have to go save Paz's kid, and you like really see a part of Fat Paz, like he's not just some, tough tough warrior guy who's gonna go shoot down an entire village of pirates who basically tried to kill off their friends. Like after they had that episode, and then, and then they had to go save this kid from the bird that they later on adopted the baby birds as part of their Mandalorian clan, which is typical of Mandalorians because part of their myth lore for Mandalorians is that not only are they warriors and they're very tribalistic, but they also will literally adopt an animal instead of kill it or instead of leaving it to die. They'd much rather adopt the animal and then take it on and either they call them a foundling in the story. Or it's either that or they're a mount. They're a creature to ride or a creature to enhance their battle techniques. But that's what I mean by side characters. Is they're extremely vital. Like Neville Longbottom in Harry Potter. He was a side character. You later on find out that he was going to be the boy who lived. Like if Voldemort hadn't been told the wrong information, he'd have gone after Neville. And so, Neville Longbottom was a side character. I'm reading the first book Harry Potter to my middle child because my eldest child is okay with me reading to him, but he prefer to, avoid going to bed and just play his tablet. But then you got Castiel who has to hear stories from Daddy. So I've been reading a bit of the first book to him, and one thing that's jumped out to me because I've gotten 11 chapters, 12 chapters into it of the 17, and I'm just going, Neville's a side character. I don't remember that. I remember it being a main, but she started him off as a secondary cameo, and he'd pop up every so often in the story, but then he became the other boy who lived, the unsung hero, and that's one of the strengths of the writer, but it's also a demonstration of my point. I'll shut it down. Go ahead. I know you got something to say.
I think The Walking Dead is probably one of the best utilization of side characters and static characters because take Daryl Dixon. Okay. All right.
Yes.
Daryl Dixon, who's not even in the comic book at all. All right. Was a side character who then became a static character who is now one of the main characters.
Yes.
Okay.
I love Daryl. Everyone loves Daryl. You can't hate Daryl.
So, there you go. Take Glenn. Glenn was a static character, which again is a side. And
he was a pizza guy.
Huh?
He was a pizza guy. That's how he saved Rick initially in the very first season. He was a pizza guy. He's like, I used to deliver pizzas. Come on, this is easy.
Right. So again, he's like a side character. Everybody loves Glenn. He falls in love with Maggie. Maggie, the side character, and then Glenn, what happens to him, and then Maggie then becomes a static, and now Maggie is a main.
Exactly.
So I think Walking Dead is probably one of the best utilizations of your side and static characters moving up and becoming mains. I think another one that was really good at that for a while was Game of Thrones in the first season or two. I think it was really good with that.
Especially after they had to split up the story because when they were adapting the story, they I think it was book 3 and 4 or 4 and 5, whichever one. He basically diverts the narrative in two to where your cast is on one side of the world and then your other cast is on the other side of the world. And so then at some point they were to merge, And so your seasons 2 and 3 or 3 and 4 were basically each book individually. So therefore, it causes your season to no longer be focused so much on John or so much on the other characters, as opposed to your side characters. To your point,
Right? Yeah, and Jon Snow started out as a static character, even though they gave him the appearance as a side character. He was actually a static that eventually became the main, But I mean, yeah, very, very good illustration and all that. So you have to give those backstories and put a little life into them, even if they just remain a side character and they never evolve into anything more than that. If you can give them that life, they're going to enhance your statics and your mains.
exactly. And another thing I wanted to talk about is that's part of this is what are some examples you can think of where background characters end up enhancing the villain and not just the hero?
Well, let's go back to Walking Dead. Negan. Look at all the side characters to Negan that enhanced Negan. We are Negan, and they would come out and just do horrific things and treat people horrifically. And you're still waiting to meet this Negan character. Negan, the one of the main antagonists when you get into whatever season, and you don't even see him. He's a main character that you don't see right away. And how did they enhance him? They made you hate him before you ever met him.
Yep. No, they made his presence ominous and poignant before he said a single line. And granted, the guy who plays him chews up scenery like crazy as an actor, and likes to talk really slow.
Yeah,
We're gonna
Jeffrey Dean. Yes, I love
kick
him.
your ass.
He's a great actor.
And then you're gonna thank me for kicking your ass. Now, I remember Jeffrey D. Morgan from when he was on Supernatural as Dean and Sam's dad. But when I saw him on Walking Dead, I was like, holy shit. Like, he went from being like that quiet, like, protagonist or quiet, hunter guy who would take on demons to being a total asshole.
Yeah.
It was great. It was awesome. It was great seeing him flex his chops. They're apparently going to be bringing him into The Boys, by the way. I don't know if you follow that show, but they're bringing him into The Boys. I'm going to guess he's going to play a villain.
Oh, I hope so. No. Yeah, no. They again, your side characters. They enhance whether it's the good guy or the bad guy. As I'm talking about, I have my main characters in the book that I'm writing, and I have a lot of sidekicks that are enhancing both sides. I mean, I have my evil vampires that are enhancing the evil vampires, and one of them, Alistair, who is a Marquis, kind of steps in out of nowhere when one of the statics, Devlin, who's a High Duke, is ready to basically stand up against the Sovereign, and this Marquis out of nowhere just injects him in the side of his neck, and you're just like, well, what the fuck? Where did that come from? What? Who's this? And now he's again a side character waiting for an audience with the Sovereign, and you're just like, where does this character fit in? What's going on here? I want to know more. So now you're like, who's playing who in what? All these little back games that are going on, this whole House of Cards, House of Cards, there's a good one for you,
Yep. Yeah, no, I one thing I like about side characters especially is aside from giving them airspace, airtime, allowing yourself to humanize them and stuff, but it's also allowing them to show their heart, like show how they mirror the main character's pain or their emotion, and show like demonstrations of family, like family themes, friend themes, just themes of your story, like thematically speaking, on a holistic standpoint as much as a macro standpoint. Like you can find out, myth lore. You can give cameo appearances to, like say a mythosaur. Like the mythosaur was a big part of Mandalorian this third season, and it's also a creature that's in the games. They're bringing in some of the EU from Star Wars into that show, and the mythosaur is part of their mythology. And when they brought in the mythosaur, when Din went into the water and he saw the mythosaur, I was like, "You're shitting me!" And then the wife's like, "What do you mean?" And I'm like, going, "Bro, like they brought in the mythosaur, like they brought in like a very intense, very prolific part of the Mandalorian mythology from the extended universe. Because in like KOTOR 1 and KOTOR 2, you learn a bit piece by piece of their Mandalorian traditions. And then when they showed the mythosaur, that was bringing back part 2, which was KOTOR 2. The Lord of the Rings is an example of how side characters affect the nemesis of the story. That is a good call out, Diana. Thank
Huge,
you.
huge.
Thank you. That is giant. Like even Rings of Power, when they did Rings of Power, which is really just them delving into Silmarillion and delving into a lot of Tolkien's OG lore before he even wrote the Ring story. That's still a big deal because like even the side characters in that story were big.
Yes. Now, see, I love the Lord of the Rings, and Diana can confirm this and all that. The story that I'm writing, I take a lot of that epic, multiple stories going on at one time, and
Yeah.
you're gonna see that when you get my PDF and all, you're gonna see how I utilize that. I mean, I have things going on in the United States, in Scotland, and the throughout the UK. I'm in. I just now entered into Morocco and Madagascar. So I'm all over the world with all these different things coming on as people are starting to come together, and it's like which kind of is a reversal in one aspect of the Lord of the Rings because they all start out kind of together and
And
convoluted
then
out.
diverge.
Whereas I am, all of mine are all over the world and they're all coming together into this. Just when it happens, it happens. Oh boy.
So it's kind of like Heroes. I don't know if you remember Heroes, but
Yes. Yes.
TV show on NBC, Heroes, season 1 literally starts out with like each episode having like a character, like Claire in one episode, Hero
Right.
Nakamura in another. Then you
Yep.
have Peter Petrelli and then his brother Nathan Petrelli, who was a senator. And like it shows even Matt Parkman, the telepath, like it shows like all these different characters having their own stories happening. And then like close to like midway through the season is then you start to see like everything start to come together.
Right.
And it's similar type of thing you're talking about.
Right, right. So, I mean, I have a lot of inspiration from a lot of different things and all that I'm utilizing in my writing. And, I think that's one of the other things that makes writing just fantastic is the ability to look at other works of art and, you know, um, infiltrate some of that knowledge into the things that you're doing that actually make your stuff just that much spectacular.
Exactly. See here, she says Lucifer as an example in so many belief systems of that too. Without humans, he'd be sitting there wondering what to do. That is a good point. He'd probably just be running his bar and just be like, and then like the detective would show up and be like, "Hello, detective."
Yes, yes. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
no, I love
Lucifer's another
Lucifer.
good example of humor and wit and how the side characters develop into basically static characters and really, I mean, and your static characters are still side characters. They're more prevalent, and how they bring the show, with this dynamic and all that together. They enhance everything.
Exactly. Now, Lucifer is actually a good example of that too, because like for the longest time, you had Detective Douche, who didn't really have much of a story aside from just sitting around and being mad at Lucifer for always being involved with crime investigations,
Right.
even though he totally was at the Lux Hotel a lot. And then later on, you find out like he has a daughter. You find out about his ex-wife. His ex-wife happens to be embroiled with Lucifer. Using and then Lucifer's mom shows up and inhabits the body, and then they have like that whole story going on. And so therefore, Detective Douche gets more of a story, and he's not so much a douche anymore.
Right.
The same Daniel.
Yeah. I mean, again, you bring a sidekick to life and enhance the whole story, and it gives more, you can utilize that sidekick to give compassion, to give humor, to whatever the case is, or just bring out some heart and soul to the main character.
Exactly. That's one of the things that I like most about side characters as well is that to me they're not even side characters. They're just characters you haven't explored yet. And yes, it's the layers of the onion that can keep the story alive and the reader interested. Indeed.
Absolutely.
Perfect wording, graceful wording.
Yeah.
That's why I said what I said with side characters to me are nothing more than just characters that I haven't explored yet. Like to me they're not a side character. To me I just haven't gone into their story and I haven't explored it yet. And there could easily be a whole novel about them. Like you could find out about their role, you could find out about they stand. Because if your world is not that big, then yeah, of course there'll be side characters. But if your world is huge, then you could find out an entire roster cast of people that you have never even met yet. And you can find out that there's a whole other part of the story that you haven't explored yet.
Right.
And you can therefore use that to expand mythology, but also really show it as a way to give more power to your original hero. Because then, therefore, you have some mirroring, you have some potential to tap into, you have layers, as Diana put it, of the onion that haven't been peeled back yet. And so
Right.
you can explore different facets.
You bring up in the notes myth lore.
Yes.
I use right now a lot of my side characters to help bring to life the lore that I'm trying to install, because I've taken the common lore of vampires and druids and I've changed them. I've altered the lore, and I've made them a little bit different than what the standard lore is. Just like a vampire and all that. Vampires can be killed and they don't live forever. They're not immortal because of, again, as you read into and find out more of the lore, that way back, the druids got pissed off and changed their abilities. So the standard vampire that people are familiar with today is what they used to be, and now they're more humanized. And the druids, where is their power today? Why don't they have power? Because, well, they pissed off the elemental source of all,
Yes.
So again, I'm using the side characters to kind of give a history of things that have happened and occurred to bring into the concept of what's actually going on. So that plays a huge role in it. So again, your side characters, instead of doing like an info dump at the beginning and trying to explain everything, you use your side characters to give bits and pieces here and there so that things make more and more sense along the way.
Yes, exactly. And also, myth lore can also be explored through the side characters to tell your hero, reader, viewer, whoever it is that's consuming the story, more about the world than they would have known before. Like,
Right.
let's say your king is merciless, but he is a decent family man, but he has to be ruthless as a king. But the other side of town doesn't know that he, tries to be a family man. They can tell you that he's this merciless, cruel man who likely because people like to talk a lot, they'd be like, well, he likely goes home and beats his wife, or likely goes home and is cruel to. I don't even know if he has a family. I don't know if anybody could ever love him. And then, like, the more you learn about the character, you find out that he goes home and he takes care of his family, and he struggles hardcore with power and control, and struggles hardcore because he suffered a tragedy as a child, and that drives his story and everything like that. But yet the people themselves only know a couple of things about him because that's all they've ever experienced. And so therefore it gives you more nuance. And then you have like your side characters that you find out that side character needed help at one particular time, but because the king has to become, has to be just or has to be a decent ruler, he can't just be a nice guy who says yes to everybody. He had to say no to that person, but he really wanted to be able to do it. And then that side character either becomes a future villain or becomes somebody who's just resentful and doesn't want to help when the main quest comes up. And therefore, you end up finding out that that side character experienced a tragedy, and therefore, you yourself as a person are like, I did go to the hospital one time and got spited by that doctor, and then you find out the doctor wanted to help you, but they got told no by insurance. And so, like, the story continues to develop, and it starts to really become real to you as a viewer, because they're no longer just static digits on a page. They're people that have experiences and had to deal with hardships, and yet everyone around you is having to make hard calls. And it depends also on how hardcore your world is too, because you can have a story like Once Upon a Time that is super PG and nicey nice, and it's all about good and evil. And then you can have a show like Game of Thrones where, like, because the daughter of the king was raised to be, very prissy and stuff like that, but she didn't like how the stable boy came at her. She had the bodyguard remove his tongue, and it was all because of a small offense. And it's not as clean cut or not as good and evil as one would like to believe. And so you have your stable boy who's the side character, and then you have your princess who also could be a side character who's a friend of the main character who's a friend of the princess or whatever. But you have your side characters that really help make your world real.
Yes, yes. Diana threw a comment in there I wanted to share. It is often the sidekicks on television shows that lead to new series. All in the Family, To the Jeffersons, Maude, Good Times, etc. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, no, that's a perfect example too there, Diana, is a lot of times, especially since network television really depends on the show to perform well. And if, like, let's say they really like the IP, but they don't have anywhere else to take that one particular character because the actress or actor got really expensive and it still costs too much to to recast them or whatever, they'll literally just make a whole new show with a spinoff and then pilot it first to see how beloved that side character really was. And then if it really takes off, then they've got a whole new part of the EP they can sell. So really, your side characters are, again, vital.
Yep, yep. Tropes and cliches.
Yep. So basically, using them to balance narrative within the cast that's not in the spotlight, the unsung heroes. I call it NPC because in video games they're known as non-playable characters, but in fiction they're just simply known as side characters. And so basically, it's playing with tropes and cliches, aka what you're already using for your hero, your villain, and like the unreliable hero or the narrator or the anti-hero, or if you want to go even deeper with some of the other characters, you're basically either inverting expectation or you're basically using the same type of devices that you're using for your main character to then expand upon your side character. I can make sense.
Yes. Oh, definitely, definitely. I I kind of give everybody that hero, the hero's tale arc. Everybody has their hero's tale. They have they don't want to be a part of it. They're brought into it. Now they are a part of it. And how do they end up in the end? So is it a hero's tale or a villain's tale? It really doesn't matter. But you have that development, and I try to give all of my side characters that same kind of development within whatever their battle is that they have to take on.
You could even make it spicier and have it to where your main hero is following a regular narrative, but then you invert the narrative with the side character. Yeah. Or you can invert both, or you can have it to where they're both inverted on each other in design. And so therefore you're playing with one trope or cliche and then you're playing with another trope or cliche. You're mixing them together with the side character, and therefore you've also not only subverted expectation, but also made it a bit spicier.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Like, for instance, Game of Thrones. How many times did you ever watch the show and be like, I like that character? That means it's probably going to die soon. And then, like, later on, they would actually spare the character, but then kill off another character you like. And you're just like, no, I don't want to kill off. And, and then they would invert the expectation with another episode and the character. And you're kind of just stuck being like, this hurts. And the writer's just like, oh.
Yes, yes, I know. And the other thing is that I have no problem with killing off a character if it needs to be done. I don't care. It's kind of like, again, The Walking Dead. Glenn. I mean, oh my God, you killed who?
Right, exactly.
So I mean, yeah, sometimes you have to do the unexpected because then that kind of brings people into it a little bit more.
I got a little bit more inside every time that Lucille bat hit Glenn's head. Every time it smacked his head, I was like, ugh!
Yes, yes. And it brought out a whole nother side of the show. I mean, it brought out a darkness that went beyond the darkness they were already living. I mean, talk about an enhancement to the show. I mean, it's just like, how do you survive such an evil monster? How do you survive something that's so invincible? And then you take a sidekick, Eugene, to mastermind the downfall.
Yes.
It wasn't Daryl. It wasn't Rick. It wasn't Michonne. It wasn't Maggie. It was who?
Eugene.
Eugene.
They never long bottomed his ass. They were like, hey, you know how you were in the background before? Well, guess what? You get to be the unsung hero.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, and like there's shows like Sandman and Supernatural is a good example too. But Sandman, I don't know if you've seen that show yet at all. But the Neil Gaiman, what he did with Sandman was interesting. He made it to where every single story, like that was in an episode, had to have Sandman himself involved in it, right? But everyone else could change. Like literally, he would have episodes that either were having parts of the cast that weren't explored yet, or having parts of the cast that revolved around him. And as long as he was either mentioned or involved, he was part of it. And so therefore, you were able to have the dreaming Morpheus, Morpheus of the Endless, involved in it in some least way or major way. Like there was a episode of the show that was at a diner, and it starts out normal, conventional. People are trying to order their food. One of our persons working at a company. You later on find out that his wife and him are rules running the company themselves. You find out not all is great with their marriage. You find out that the waitress, who's really, really friendly, is a people pleaser. And as they delve more and more into the story, the guy who's actually played by Remus Lupin, David Thewlis, he is the son of this lady who got a hold of Dream's pendant. That was one of his, rocks that helped create his powers. And as that rock passed through different people, it eventually led to her. Her son, who just got out of prison, or she was technically in an insane asylum, he goes to that diner. And the diner episode is kind of like a Twin Peaks episode. It's like a mind bender. And it starts out very conventional. And then it goes and becomes inverted. And suddenly, this guy who's talented with bringing out the truth to people, you find out the truth can be deadly. And as long as Dream or Morpheus is involved with the show, they could bounce between different parts of the cast. And so the first episode of the show is extremely different from this particular episode. And this episode is completely different from another episode. As long as Morpheus is involved in it, it doesn't matter. It can go anywhere. And so that's another example where your side characters can become elevated to the main character. Because in any other show, those characters would never have been explored. And if they were explored, it would have been because they were in the sixth season and they had to explore somebody else other than our main cast. And so you got your benefit of being able to explore characters that would never be touched upon. And that's one of the reasons why I love the Sandman.
Yep.
It's an amazing show. And which also brings up Supernatural. Supernatural is one of the shows where, as long as it's centered on Dean and Sam, they could really explore any part of their mythology. And they did. They explored, like, season 6 was about minor gods. Season 7 was about purgatory and Crowley's wrestling match with other demons over power. Another season was about one of the apocalypses, and then you find out about the Men of Letters, and like each one of the parts of the mythology would never been explored if they didn't highlight their side characters. Now, granted, Sam and Dean had a giant amount of plot armor, and so every time they die, they would magically come back. But your side characters would either get offed or otherwise at least explored, and they'd get a lot of airtime. So you had a lot of nice little cameos from the other actors, or you had other actors who played a previous character in another season reappear as a completely different character in another season. And so therefore you had like a rotation of sorts. But it's another example of where your side characters can't just be static.
Right, right. But yes, no, my side characters play a very important role in everything that's going on. They It's almost as if the side characters are my narrators to some degree. They let you know who's doing what, where, when, and how, and why, and it kind of aids in when certain main characters or static characters do things. You see what their you know um, purpose is, or what they're up to, and why. What drives them, what motivates them. So I see it as side characters are more of like the integral part of the emotional aspect of the main characters.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I actually I can't wait for you to send me your PDF of your story so I can like send notes back and like because I'm not just gonna read it and be like, oh, this was great, keep going. I'm gonna look back at it and be like, wait a minute, in this part, like I'm gonna do notes and stuff and
Yeah.
give you constructive feedback. And I'm gonna apply a lot of stuff we talk about in this podcast. Like this podcast isn't just for us to like hear ourselves talk. Like it's also meant to help people and just enjoy the process of writing. But like I'm gonna end up using some of it.
Well, and that's what we all do. That's why we all share with each other and critique each other. We learn from each other. And as I've said before, no writer is an expert writer. I just had Daigle on Tuesday Takes, and I brought this up then. None of us writers are experts. We're always learning, we're always improving, we're always bringing something to the table, and we're taking from what others have brought to the table and learning something from that. And that's what makes our stories better each time. So
Yep.
without hearing and listening and reading other people's works, we're not going to get better. We have to take those criticisms because it helps us improve our game.
Dude, like the writing community in general, like especially with spaces, like I've been like starving for massive spaces, right? It's because of the fact that when I was listening to other people, like I was listening to their work and I was listening to other voices, and then I would, read a chapter or two here and there. I didn't read the whole fucking thing, but I'd read out like a chapter or two, and then I'd get constructive feedback. Like Luke helped a lot with some of it.
Mhm.
You've helped a lot with some of it. Like there's been a rotation of sorts where everyone's kind of helped each other with it, and we don't grow unless we're all helping each other anyway. So that's a fabulous point there. And also, I'd like to mention if in the next, after the break that we take after the show, it'd be nice to have Dago on here.
Yes, definitely. And that reminds me, just letting everybody know, I will be. This is going to be our last show for about 2, maybe 3 weeks. I'm going to go into an hiatus here because I am finishing up Rainbow Prophecy, Book One, Blood Schism, and I'm going to submit it, and hopefully, I'll have some good news here in about 3 to 4 weeks on where it's going to be and who's publishing it, and hopefully all the juicy details. I'm hoping to, get more than just a one book deal. I'm hoping to look at something a little bit bigger than that, but we'll see. We'll see. Got to finish this one first, and
Yeah.
I'm over, way over the 40,000 word mark and all that. I'm at, I think last count's like 44,000, 45,000, somewhere like there. But
It's a very good count.
yeah, I'm I am booking on it. I am booking on it. I know. I think the last time that you and I talked, I was at like 32, and here I am. I'm at in fact, here I got it up. Let me look. I know I'm at almost 50. I am at whoa, what would I just do? There we go. Um, yeah, 45,214 words. So yeah, I am booking on it. Yes.
I'm playing with my relay now. Anyway, yeah, no, I actually, I love the fact that you've made that much progress though, because the fact that you know it's hard. It's hard to get that type of progress, right? And like especially like if you had a busy life and everything. So really, that takes dedication to jump up like that, to go from 32,000 or 34,000, whatnot, and then to go to 44. And the fact that you're going to be taking a 2 to 3 week break, which means you're going to be pumping out even more. So watch as like the next time we talk, you're going to be like, here, by the way, you know where I was? Well, guess what? 80,000 right there.
Yeah. Well, here's the funny thing is that before I didn't know how to do a word count on Pages, which is what I use. I have an Apple and I do my writing on Pages, and I didn't know how to do how to show the word count. I just didn't dig into it, and I was doing my standard. I'm in a 12 font. I count out my lines and multiply by 10, and there's my word count. Well, unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. Um, because where I thought I was at 40 to 50,000, I was only at about 20,000, and I was like, "Ooh, okay, I'm not as far as I thought I was." So I had to dig in, and in the last month, I've put out another 25,000 words. So, um, once I figured out how to do that, now it's like, okay, I got that word count going. I can see what I'm doing on a daily basis. And hey, I'm doing pretty damn good. Now, once I can, again, take this little hiatus from my shows, and yes, I've been doing them since August of last year. It's been almost a year that I've been just cranking out show after show after show. I'm on my YouTube channel. I think I'm up to like 200 videos or something like that. So I'm cranking out some videos.
Yeah,
Uh,
no, you definitely deserve a break, especially to focus on, the thing that a lot of us writers need to be doing anyway, which is writing. I took a Twitter hiatus, like 50% hiatus, because of the fact that I was on Twitter, I was interacting, I was I was interacting with you, for instance, with this podcast, but I was also interacting with some people here and there. But I was focused on writing. I was focused on, getting a project done. And when you are so involved with playing whimsy and so involved with being like, oh shit, this character needs to be explored. Oh wait, that part needs to be explored. And you have like a list of things you want to tackle. That word count can balloon, like it can jump up. So I have all the faith in the world that you will end up where you need to be in the next 2 or 3 weeks once you take this giant break. Like you probably need it anyway. You probably need it for decompression too. But yeah,
definitely,
I hope.
definitely. Well, I know I wanted to get to about 80,000. That was my goal. And now that I know where I'm at and the amount of material that I have to work with, I can actually get more descriptive as I go. Excuse me, because I have one, I need more words, so I can get more descriptive, and that's going to help me with the expansion of my characters and where I'm aiming to end up. I feel more comfortable that I'm not as far as what I thought I was, believe it or not, because now I have more freedom to include things that at the beginning I wasn't including. Because once I realized that, I went back and I did a lot of restructuring on my chapters, added some more in here and there, and did some rewriting. So again, part of the things that is being expected of me in this when I present it, and what I want to get out there, for the reader. I think when I'm done, it's probably going to be about 100 to 120,000 words. And that'll be just book one. I plan on making this a 3-book series. So, and of course, Diana, I've been reading chapters to her and Shadow Fox, and of course, every chapter ends with a cliffhanger, and and they're just like, we want more, and then it's like, well, how do you think book one's going to end, everybody? In a cliffhanger.
Yes, exactly. You got to like if you don't end it on a cliffhanger, then like you're gonna end up like because some readers hate that, right? But like a lot of readers, especially ones that like need to be like, here's a taste of where it's gonna be. Like they need that cliffhanger. Like it's gonna keep their interest. So you have to.
Well, I mean, it's gonna be conclusionary in a lot of aspects. I mean, there's a lot of things that will come to a conclusion because now you know what things are and where they're headed. But it also opens up doors. Those conclusions open up other doors. And that's what's going to set you on that cliffhanger at the end of the book. Like, oh my God, oh my God, this is what's going to happen. I can't wait. I need it. Kind of like take that huge Marvel movie Endgame. Okay.
Yes.
I mean, what a cliffhanger. A lot of things came to conclusion with half the population being gone.
Yes. And giant like storms of all hell broke loose, and when they actually like a lot of this last phase of Marvel has been focusing heavily on the snap and post snap. Like it's been happening like for 5 years, because between Infinity War and Endgame there was like a 5-year gap. They first focused on in the movie, they focused on our main cast, Avengers people, what the effect was, but they've spent an entire phase focusing on so many other parts of the world that were affected by the snap and the blip. They were showing all sorts of stuff about it. Like that was part of what the phase was not only showing the tensions that arose, but also where everything was. And I know they're going to be focusing on. They've got this new series they're coming out with for Fury, where they're showing where Fury's been this entire time, because like he's been sort of just absent. But that's a big part of it. It's showing what happens to your world after a big giant event happens, which can also help with side characters.
Right, right.
That's what I did there. But yeah, no, I'm hoping that once we get back from the break, I'll be further along with my own sequel. Which, by the way, Snake of the Dame is technically a prequel of a sequel or a prequel of a story. But I technically broke up because of Nightfall into 2 books, right? And I was working on a sequel to that story. And then Night Terror Rising, aka the volume that it's called, hijacked me and stole me and then threw me into the past to write Snake of the Dame. And so Storms of Blood, which is the sequel of Snake of the Dame, is going to be my first official sequel actual release that's intended of everything. So like it's going to be my first ever time writing a sequel in general. Like intended, I've already written the story; it just needs to be edited. But it's my first ever sequel release, intended anyway. So that'll be fun. But yeah, no, I wait for us to be when we come back. Everything's going to be rested, hopefully. Recovered a little bit. You're going to get some mental time to break away and play around with your little toys and stuff, and then you're gonna come back and be like, what's up?
Yes, yes. Well, not only that, I mean, everything's kind of cascading into a moment, and it's just like, it's too much. I can't do it. I can't do it. If I'm going to
Well,
get
it
this
is in the
done,
moment.
uh, exactly. So if I'm going to get this book done and I'm going to put my full concentration into it, I can't be doing the show and writing the book. So in the book, hopefully that becomes a livelihood for me. So I got to get the book done. I mean,
Yes.
I'm not monetized on YouTube yet, but if I can get a good book out and with a good publishing company, I might be able to gain a little traction and maybe eventually get monetized on here. So Then when I go on vacation, then I can have somebody fill in for me, and while I still get paid.
Yep, exactly.
Uh, that's all down the road. We'll see. Eventually, hopefully, one day it happens. And if it doesn't,
Hey, I had to give the audience updates on where we're kind of going. That way,
yep.
they don't just abruptly see everything stop.
Right. And just for the record and all that, yeah, it would be nice to make money on this, but that's not my goal. My goal is to entertain and have fun and educate people and have discussions. So whether I make money at this or not doesn't matter. I'll be doing this until the day I'm put into a grave. So this is what I'm going to do because I love it. I love doing this.
Oh, same here. This is beyond fun for me. Like being able to talk about stuff, and eventually, we've talked about it in the past. We've talked about doing like reviews of shows or stuff or whatever, and like giving ourselves buffer time. I just haven't done that really right now because life's just been so crazy for me the
Yeah.
last few months that it's been hard to do that. So I've just been like having us talk about writing mechanics, exploring different facets of the craft itself. And then sometime soon, I hope that we can start doing a bit of a refresh, like doing a bit of a swerving, if you will, of like, hey, this week we'll talk about this story, or this week we'll talk about this show or something. And then like later on, kind of go back to a little bit of, revisiting old topics, and then just kind of like playing around with it, just playing around with it. Pretty much it's just us having fun and, and BSing anyway.
Yeah. Yes. All right. Excellent show, T-Paul. Remember, everybody, be kind, be happy, and may good things come your way. Thank you.
Have a week.